dedicated to the dreamers. Yeah, life in the grind. It's dedicated to the dreamers. It's life in the grind. Dedicated to the dreamers.
Dream big, have faith, work hard. Never quit, put your trust in God. Stay true and remember who you are. Never forget how you made it this far. Dream big, have faith, work hard. Never quit, put your trust in God. Stay true and remember who you are. Never forget how you made it this far. I feel like this world is trying to break my soul. I say no, I say no, I say no, you can't take it now. Come a long way, but still so far to go. Yeah, I know I can make it. I guess they forgot about me.
What's going down, everybody? Welcome to the Root of It All show. Jody McGarity Jr. coming to you with another episode. This is part 2 of our episode with my son, Tarale Murry. It just sounds like that boy's in trouble when you say his full name. But we are going to be continuing on with this interview to be able to know what we discussed in part 1. You'll see the link below in the description. Go ahead and click that so you can get caught up to speed. But we're going to continue on in our conversation with this young man about his journey and how he's just continuing to move forward in his life from his upbringing, things that he's learned, and to be able to share with you all some important things that he is being inspired by that continues to motivate him and keep him going in life. So how are you doing on this day, son?
I'm doing great, doing fine. About your errands, but I bought a bunch of food. So if y'all hear in the background any beeps, any closing ovens and foil wrapping, those my two brothers, Tarale Murry, trying to feed themselves. So just excuse any other noise in the background.
All right, man. You just never know what happens on the root of it all. Things can happen. But in this, just a little bit of a synopsis. We talked about how, your experiences of one, missing that connection in that relationship with me early on, things growing up, certain feelings that you had and some experiences that you shared. We got into that part to where how it has been able to shape you and mold you and things that transpired once our time was redeemed. Now we're going to shift into more of how, you face different challenges in school, from high school to college. What are some of the things that, helped you get through some of the difficult times that you had in that point? And then also, I think we'll get into a little bit, since we're kind of still dealing with that. How have you survived being up there in Michigan with COVID, things of that nature, focusing on school, especially pursuing your PhD degree? We'll kind of talk about that at the end. But let's talk about high school. Talk about your experience in high school. How was that for you as a young student athlete?
It was great. Started off very much humble and hungry. As a freshman, goal was to make varsity. I remember so I ended up transferring to the high school that I was going to go to, or to the middle school, which was zoned to the high school that I technically should have gone to. I could have been grandfathered in to go to the rival high school. But mom was like, I'm not about to drive you to that high school when you can just walk to this one. But in that process, my goal was to make varsity as a freshman. So I talked with the coach in 8th grade and was like, hey, my name's Tarale. My goal is to make varsity. The other high school, they're going to start me for JV, and hopefully, they'll move me up in the season. And the coach, Thomas Acker, was like, well, I can't guarantee you a spot, but, I'll definitely guarantee an opportunity. To try to make one of the teams. And I was like, okay, yes, sir. And so, sure enough, I think 2 or 3 months into the start of school year, after being in the freshman class period, coach was like, we want to move you up to the JV varsity class period. So that was just a funny beginning of the process. No, but overall, it was really a great experience, like all 4 years, which with the friends that I have, my understanding actually was not the case for a lot of people that I know. It was actually kind of the worst time, or it was very a tough time for them. So I, again, was very fortunate to have the experience that I did. And a part of that, the reason why I had as many connections, relationships with people, was because eventually, somehow, I can't actually remember what the seed was, but ended up becoming involved with the FCA group, Fellowship for Christian Athletes. And I remember one time talking to you about it, and I think it was where we were at church or getting ready setting up church, stuff like that. And you were making wings for the church or after church, whatever, some barbecue or after church picnic. And so the thought I was worried about was like, how do I manage, going to my senior year, as many students in the FCA, with as many people that had joined the first, semester or so. Like, it was like, oh, how do I do this? Do I kind of just do this on my own, or do I try to bring as many people, have like a little team type thing? And so I remember I was carrying a chicken, and I feel like you spend time seasoning and stuff. And I was trying to carry it by myself, and when I went in and opened the door, it kind of fell out. And so in my head, especially in high school, people would say I was on fire for the Lord. Every little thing, God was speaking to me at something. So for me, I took that as like, oh, all right, don't do nothing by yourself. And so, sure enough, I sought out about 5 or 6 other members, high schoolers, from sophomores up to seniors, to help me with the FCA group. And it was really a tremendous experience. And for me, it was like an opportunity to, almost like a petri dish of, me being in church, also me, Great New Life, but also hearing other pastors, mega church pastors or whatever, different scandals and stuff. So it's like, oh, let me not repeat these things I've seen or heard. And so I think it was just a great opportunity to really gain some experience. I think the Bible talks about saying, with your wisdom, get understanding. And so I get some experience. And so there was just some experiences I had to go through with that as well. But overall, it was good. Had some tough, hard lessons to learn. As you mentioned before, as I stated in the first episode, I am pursuing my PhD, which may not be a surprise to many of the people in high school, but I remember disappointing a lot of people in high school, including some of my family members, when I made my decision to go to the college that I went to. I ended up going to UT Austin, but that was over, or rather, instead of going to the University of Pennsylvania, got accepted into the Wharton School of Business, which at the time was number 1 in the nation. Turned down a full ride scholarship or opportunity to go to Washington University in St. Louis. Had Princeton opportunity to go to Princeton. Got accepted to Cornell. And so it's like everyone was like, "Oh, Tarale's the one who's gonna make it out of here." And I made a decision to stay, go home, go to UT Austin. And I think you remember this. I was really putting a lot of thought, prayer, even fasted for a week for it, because it was like, I do not want to mess up this decision. And I know I'm rambling, but I'm gonna tie things in together. So I know last episode we talked about kind of what were the challenges, frustrations I had. I do know that as I was making my college decision, I was doing a lot of self-reflection. In 7th or 8th grade, I remember being outside of Barton Middle School, waiting for my mom to pick me up. And for some reason, I just remember thinking, when I apply to college, I'm applying everywhere outside the state of Texas, because I'm going to try to get as far away from home as possible. And so in the process of thinking about, which college to go to, got accepted to about 7 or 8 of them. And I only applied to UT just because it was a safety school. At the time I was granted as top 10%. And I remember the reason why I even applied to out-of-state colleges was because I wanted to get as far away from my family. So ironically enough, made my decision to stay at UT because it's like, I want to stay close to home. One, for my faith, because just feel that everywhere I visited, something was off. And it's also for my family. So up to this point, when it's like, oh, I went to UT Austin, oh, why'd you go there versus everywhere else? It's because of my faith and family. So again, I can ramble on, but that's kind of how high school went in a 4-minute nutshell, or maybe 5 minutes. But that's, yeah.
Good deal. So you mentioned that, you wanted to, go out of state, things of that nature, get away from family, the mindset. What was the reasoning behind having that thinking?
And so while there's so many positives and great things that I tend to want to frame and focus on, I think frustrations, seeing disagreements, whether it was between my mom and stepdad and my stepmom for whatever reasons, seeing disagreements within my mom and stepdad. So it was just like a lot of just conflict, if you will. Plus, then just for me, whether it was I felt that I wasn't meeting someone's expectation or upset somebody, or I'm feeling like, man, I'm not doing something right. And so it's like, you know what? I'm gonna just apply, go out of state, just get far away from here. I don't have to worry about your mom nagging me about this or me messing up with, because I did something mean to my siblings. And I remember one time I got in trouble and I blamed Deja. No, but one time I got in trouble because they did something and you were like, boy. And so for me, it was just like, dang, I'm getting in trouble for everybody else. But so I think at the time, I'm sure there was just different things that happened where it was like, man, all right, fine. I'm a, be quiet, be humble, be obedient, whatever. Oh, but I'm definitely getting out of here for college. And so, by the grace of God, I was able to find that and realize that that should not be a motivating factor for me to make decisions. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing that listeners need to know, growing up as a kid, when you're growing up with the McGarity girls that belong to me, then jokes can be some tough cookies sometimes. So, it's at times where, having to learn some patience, how I was able to learn how to quit being a womanizer and start respecting women. One, my foundation had to change. So once I gave my life to Christ, a lot of things had to shape up in that sense. Specifically when having daughters, you don't want them to be treated the way, unfortunately, how I used to treat women back in the day. So those are one of the main important keys in that. So you get to the part to where we get through high school. You made a great influential impact. I think you're being modest, and there's nothing wrong with stating the fact. But let's talk about briefly, and we'll move on to experience at UT and all the other schools that you went through and currently are at. Talk about when you joined FCA, how many members were there versus how many members was there total when you walk across the stage receiving your high school diploma?
Part of me, I'm pretty sure I there's somewhere. I maybe got this from Grandma Joyce because I keep everything, or I want to keep everything at least. So I think I probably have the sign-in sheet somewhere. It might be in the storage because my mom's moving. But I knew the first time I had class or held like a little FCA meeting, or attended rather, I didn't hold it, hosted. I just went to one. Coach Hemphill at Lehman. Maybe there were 5 of us, maybe, I believe 5, 6. He was like, Tarale, I want you to kind of take over. For me, it was kind of put on me, and I wanted to grow, but busy with this. And I was like, okay, cool. And so I think when I walked across the stage, so that was my junior year. Maybe, it was my junior year that I joined. Senior year, when I graduated, it was over 100. And so we had a couple of fellowship, nights, Christian nights, whatever, once a month. I think the first time it was slowly built up my junior year. I invited a couple of friends, so maybe 20, 30. And I think the first, after that incident with the chicken and like, okay, I can't do this by myself, having a team, all the team members, and we really started, promoting it over the announcements. That first one, we signed up like 40 people. And then we had prayer in the mornings, every morning, or maybe it was twice a week. We'd have prayer. And so it'd be anywhere from, 3, smallest 3 to about 25, 30 kids. So yes, that was just amazing to see that happen. And again, I graded my team members. It was about 5, 6 or 7 of them. And I can go down their names if you give me a minute to think about it. But they were very integral into growing it and maintaining it because, it was a good amount of work.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to the student athletes out there of what were some of the challenges that you had being a student athlete at Lehman, being on the basketball team for year Letterman. What were some of those challenges you faced as a student athlete? And then let's go ahead and zipper into college and talk about your desire of wanting to play collegiate basketball and the challenges that you had going to that journey.
So challenges. I would say, yes, what required work for me personally, specifically, and this is even just a lifelong thing, this is a physical, athletic thorn. The guy was like, hey, you're just gonna keep this. No, but honestly, I've been injured all my life. I think the first injury was when I was maybe 4th or 5th grade and did something to my shoulder. And so I was like, well, getting injured is not fun. But since then, freshman year, I had Achilles tendonitis. Actually broke my thumb 7th grade year. Um, Pulled my groin. Made varsity. So the first 2 weeks ended up pulling my groin of the season. Pulled it again. Broke my foot my sophomore year. Had a concussion junior year. No, maybe it was senior year. But so for me, the challenges for me was really along the lines of how do I understand all these injuries and why. It gave me the opportunity, and I, was like, to learn about the body. So some of my closest relationships, both at Layman, UT Austin with the basketball program, Texas A&M with the basketball programs, has been with the strength coaches and the athletic trainers. And so learned about the body, or continue to learn more about the body. You had Texas Disciples, your business, and you trained me as well. So for me, it was just understanding how the body works, or trying to get as much information about what's going on with the body. And even to this day, I'm still reading and trying to learn, and even trying new things for myself because my lower back and all this stuff. So the challenge for me was just how do I accept the scripture that says bodily exercise profit little, because it's like, sheesh, I'm doing all these hills, I'm doing all this stuff, but then in less than a second, I had a severe sprain, missed like 3 or 4 weeks at the start of my senior year, where I was trying to make some noise, 22-12, and next through tape, the ankle that was taped up is what had a severe high ankle sprain. So like what? So the challenge was just understand, like, okay, what is my purpose? What can I still contribute? What can I still do? How can I still grow in this? Because I can choose to be upset, be mad, frustrated, and for me, that's not going to really do much. So that was a challenge I had to overcome. I was very grateful and fortunate that my mom stayed on top of me academically. She actually pulled me out my sophomore year of a scrimmage, and then told my coach, I didn't fail, but told my coach I couldn't play or do anything basketball related for 3 weeks until my grades were on point. That's because I did make a C in one of my classes. I didn't turn in an assignment. But yeah, my mom was very serious. And so for me, academically, that wasn't so much of the challenge. Transitioning into going to UT Austin. So had an opportunity to play. Was recruited by a non-D1 school, so a couple D2s, Washington University in Lewis. I could have walked on, maybe had a preferred walk-on spot at University of Pennsylvania with Coach Rudy Wise. I still have a relationship with him today, but chose to go to UT Austin, and now that's the RPI 25. That's historically, traditionally great school, and so no coach has heard of my name, and so it was like, hey, if God wills it, then all right, cool. And I will say, one thing that in regards to our relationship was, I believe, was it middle school? It was around middle school, 6th to 8th grade. But I know you and I had a conversation. You were like, son, how I heard it, right? How I've heard it was, God's purpose and God's like number one calling for you is not like the NBA. So for me, it was like, if God's not stressing and do all this maneuvering, then I don't need to stress and be trying to do all this maneuvering and putting my eggs in one basket. So that actually put in great perspective to where when I got to high school, my coach asked me, what do you want to do? I was like, I want to go as far as play college basketball, but I want to use that to get my education, use that for other opportunities. And so I think that was a great framing for me. And I'm grateful that I didn't get like upset. It was just like, well, all right, cool. Well, let me go ahead and start rethinking this stuff. Cause I was thinking like, make the league and all this stuff. But so the challenge for me going to UT Austin was more so how to deal with the visible opportunity where I had Coach Nelson Taroba speak on my behalf. Coach Acker wrote a letter to the staff. Got to speak with Coach Ogden. I think I met with Coach Lanier at the time. They were like, we've heard about you. We're going to get you in for a workout. And it was like, all right, cool. Maybe, we talked about the first episode where it was like, I learned, some people will say things and may not be able to follow through for whatever reasons. And so for 2 years, I was told, we'll get you in next week. We'll work you out next week. We'll do this. And for 2 years, it didn't happen. So I was like, well, maybe I need to refocus my priorities because actually my freshman year, I actually got kicked out of the honors program, for the business honors program. Very humbling experience. Went through some challenges of one, being arrogant because it's like, I just turned down Ivy League schools, UT public school, please. What's going to be the challenge? Not realize if you make a C and two B's or three B's, you had about a 2.7. And so got kicked out and was like, yo, I need to, reorganize or rearrange my priorities. This basketball thing, I don't know what's going on. Or maybe God doesn't even want me to worry about this. And so kind of stopped training as much. I ended up getting a job at State Farm. And at one point worked like 2 or 3 jobs while going to school. Then eventually, so how I became a student athlete at UT Austin was my junior year. A couple of friends of mine, one of my friends of mine, like Clayton Kane, he redhead, pretty swole dude. I call him Lumberjack because I just was like, you probably like cutting down trees or something. But he was like, yo, T, are you going to go to the trials in a couple of weeks? And I was like, what tryouts? He was like, UT, the men's basketball team. And I was like, we're playing. And I remember hitting you and I think Karen right away. It was like, what should I do? I was like, hey, if you still want it, and there's an opportunity. So sure enough, in 2 weeks, I went and worked out with my first love, my girlfriend, Big Bertha. They've torn her down since, so rest in peace, Big Bertha. But it's a big, huge hill behind Yellow Jacket Stadium, or what was Yellow Jacket Stadium, and just ran her probably 2 or 3 times a week. I did sand pit workouts, tried to do everything that I was doing before to at least rush back in. And so, when trials came by the time, the coaches had heard of me. So it was like, oh, maybe they had an eye to see what I could do. My goal was just to try to be as in best shape as possible. I wasn't worried about shooting, wasn't worried about anything, proving nothing. Defensively, okay, it was a good shot blocker, even for my height in high school. So was doing what I could athletically. So made it to the first round, made it to the second one, or cut rather. And then sure enough, I was at my internship. I was interning with a CPA at the time. And got an email. And literally, I could not work anymore. I was like, told my boss, Miss Christina Dees, really greatly appreciate her for the opportunity that she gave me within her firm. And I was like, yeah, I made the basketball team. She was like, oh, congratulations. Okay, well, let's, work on the next 2 or 3 weeks, kind of phasing you out and helping you transition. She was very accommodating and helpful, and just knowing that, you're going to have to focus on basketball now, which I totally understand. And so that is just the beginning of the student athlete opportunity. But I think the transition up until that point was simply really saying like, this life is not my own. And what I can do is make sure I do the best with what's in front of me, and not try to fight hard. And I really credit you, Pastor Johns, and just, even in the church daily life of really at least showing me and, helping me really understand, like, you can try and fight and kick for stuff that you want. And if it's not the time, if it's not the right whatever, then kind of wasting energy. So it was like, hey, let me just make sure I do the best with what's in front of me. So academically, let me get out of this academic probation, or let me get my GPA above 3.0, or above a 2.7. Financially, with at the time it was, I think, 3 households. Because you and stepmom had separated. My mom, so now it's like, okay, so let me work, at least help in some area. So by just focusing on that, and also just my faith and walk and understanding myself and my own insecurities, opportunity presented itself. And next thing you know, I'm playing for Coach Barnes.
Yeah. And it was a great journey to be able to witness as a parent. For me, it's just, I think I took after my parents a great deal, and it wasn't, putting the pressure on you guys to work so hard so you can gain this college scholarship. I always been the individual of, if you want to go to school, let's find a way to pay for it, because I have no money that deep. My wallet does not stretch that wide to be able to pay for your education. So if you want to, let's look at those avenues. If it's academics, grades got to be on point to get an academic scholarship. If it's going to be athletics, then you have to be one of the people deserving of receiving a college scholarship to be able to pay for your education. So to be able to see that and be able to give wisdom a great deal. I mean, I learned that, I think, primarily from 3 people, if anything, and that's your grandma, your pawpaw, and then my grandfather. In that, because they always had these lessons of, if you're going to do something, you need to do it. And if you say you're going to do something, you need to make sure you do it. And in that took a lot of thorough understanding to make sure to get the job done. And if you can't get it done, what are you going to do to ensure that you do get it done? Is that going to be asking for help along the way, things of that nature? So those were integral parts, to be able to pass on to you all, you and your sister. So it was a beautiful thing. Let's talk about, are there some similar challenges when you were at A&M, pursuing your master's degree, and then also being a student assistant for the men's basketball team?
Challenges in the sense, I think, let's see, I think at what point did I kind of realize within myself that I have, met the bar, the standard, from an educational standpoint, set by my mom. Took her 7 years to graduate college, but she did it. And so it was like, okay, I got my first degree. I am in grad school. And it was a point when I realized, like, okay, not that there was actually pressure or expectations that created pressure, but it was just like, oh, I'm expected to get my education, like, no brainer. And so when I was at A&M, I think the challenge for me was figuring out, what am I actually going to do? What am I supposed to do? What my degree is for? Like, I did my degree in accounting at UT Austin. And by being on the basketball team, realized I chose accounting because, okay, I like math, like numbers, keeping track of stuff, yada, yada. And plus, financially, like, being an accountant, one has job security. And, from me growing up in a family where I was one of five, wherever I went, whether it was, at your house or my mom's, and the income that we had made it work. Definitely have no boo-hoo stories about it because 8 and had enjoyed a great time. But it was like, start off at 55,000 by myself. I'm doing accounting. But being on the basketball team, for me, it was just like there was something there's just something more being in this program, being in this organization that, accounting may not do it for me. The reason why I even pursued, went to my master's and I'm even done a PhD now was because as a student athlete, I took a class that in an interesting way, we'll say it's very positive, but that a lot of the athletes will take because it was a course that probably had a high probability of a student athlete getting an A. But at the same time, it was an African-American in sport, taught by Dr. Lewis Harrison. And they had not a flyer, but kind of gave like a little brief spiel about the Ronald McNair Scholars Program, basically which prepared minority students and first-generation students to get their PhD. And just to talk about research and studying questions, asking questions and this and that. And for me, I was a person who had a lot of questions, but as I said in the first episode, I didn't ask anybody. It was just like, well, I'm gonna find the answer myself, keep them out. But it was like, oh, research and I can ask questions and figure it out myself. So that's even what led me on the track that I'm on now with that class. And so the challenge at A&M was just, how do I make the most of these opportunities that I have here? I've learned that if you do well in front of others or for others or with others, they can speak highly for you. And so again, Coach Tarale was big in talking with Alex Lloyd, who was the video coordinator there. They said, hey, we heard some great things about you. At that time, I was like, listen, I'm coming from working 4 or 5 jobs and hustling. So I don't have a problem just going and giving 10, 15 hours, even for free, right? And so they had me come for the summer. There's a couple summer camps. I'd work camps with you at the PAC. This is just second nature for me. So did a great job there, or, they at least liked it. And it's like, well, let's teach you this video stuff. So I did volunteer my first year while I was at A&M with the men's basketball program. Became tough. So I told them, hey, I got to go work. So I can't help out as much. So then the next year they were like, hey, are you working? I was like, yeah, I'm going to start picking up some hours. Like, well, don't worry about that. We want you to be our GA. And so that, was a great segue for me. It's like, hey, here's just an opportunity that came that I didn't necessarily look for, I wasn't asking for, but that was just for me. And so it was like, well, there's no brainer. So the challenge was just more so I'm in a space where I need to figure out how can I make the impact that I feel that I should make or can make, or what I'm seeing, because I'm having a lot of questions and how can I answer those questions, but then provide those answers to people. So that's where my challenge kind of shifted to once I got to A&M.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And the big thing about this, folks, is, for someone who came up with parents not married, together, 2 separate families, having to deal with, the lack of the relationship or thereof with his father, going along these statistics of fatherless, motherless homes and the success rates of kids. This young man, through parents who refused to allow their son to be a statistic with his mother and even myself, we just didn't want that to happen, and we refused to allow that to happen. Now, a great deal of this, of course, is attributed to his mother, because I was absent in a good portion, I would say, of his life. God redeemed time just in time, when this kid's entering the high school and going into college, things of that nature. And of course, my foundation is different. But as you can see, where the Lord has brought this young man from, to where he is on his way to be able to complete within the next year and a half to 2 years his PhD degree. And in this, all things are possible, but you have to make the living sacrifice for your children, and you have to be able to teach them. You have to be able to train them up in the way that they should go. So when they become old adults, they won't depart from the teachings that we give them. And that's the key, right? And it's totally up to them, right? It's all their choices. But to be able to teach your children to be the best they could possibly be is important. So what we're going to do is we're going to end this part 2 episode here, and be able to pick back up and conclude in part number 3. Again, if you are interested in continuing to support the root of it all, definitely like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit that notification bell so you can be updated on the new episodes that we bring on. Also, too, you can visit us on Apple iTunes or Google Play or Spotify if you want to hear the audio version of this podcast with these interviews. Then also, too, if you want to support us to be able to continue to provide good content, be able to support us at the Patreon. And that link is in the description below. So we appreciate you all. We'll be back with part 3 really, really soon. So you all take care. Appreciate you listening to the Root of It All show, where we are changing lives one podcast at a time. Know that Jesus loves you and we love you too. God bless.